Tēnā koutou Aotearoa, welcome to the Export Beer Garden studio. Welcome to the BYC podcast. And this week on the BYC, we're going to be going balls out, sifting through popcorn, bald eagles, and Donald Trump paraphernalia as the USA and West Indies hosted Cricket World Cup gets underway in the land of the free and the home of the brave. I'm Paul Ford, the godfather of the Beige Brigade, and I'm joined by New Zealand's greatest sporting Substack scribe, voyeur of all things sporting, Dylan Cleaver. How the bloody hell are you, DC?
I'm starting to get a little bit tired. I've already banked a few hours in front of the screen watching the World T20. Quite enjoying it, to be honest. I don't know, have you dipped your toe into that water yet?
I have, and I was actually thinking how I haven't had too many late nights, but I wondered whether you were recording the games and then getting up in the middle of the night to watch them, or whether you were doing something else. I wasn't quite sure, because there haven't been too many punishingly mid-morning, sort of overnight games to quench our thirst so far. Is that fair?
Yeah, a couple of 2:30 a.m. starts. I don't buy into any of that nonsense. I watch them very early the next morning. But I really enjoyed the opener, which we'll talk about soon. But yeah, in terms of overall vibes, I kind of feel almost like it's been embraced more in the US venues than the Caribbean so far. And maybe that's a result of the kind of weather bomb that's surrounding the Caribbean at the moment. Caribbean. I don't know what's the correct way of saying that. But yeah, what's your thoughts, I guess, on the opening salvos?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm really obsessed with understanding what America actually thinks about the game. And are people talking about this in pubs that, amongst families, amongst friends that don't have an Indian mate? And I suspect that the answer is probably not. I don't think that there's been massive cut through. I did see that Kane Williamson had his face projected onto a building. I think it was the Rockefeller Center in the middle of New York. So I'm sure these little glimpses of cricket, if you're looking out for them, but just in the absolute maelstrom that is American society and popular culture, I suspect that cricket is not really getting a look in. And I imagine it's quite a weird sensation for a lot of the players, even for the fans, and obviously all the entourage of media and so on going around the place, and no one really knowing who the hell they are or what they're there to do. I can imagine being in customs and people are like, you're here to do what? And they just wouldn't understand what the hell was going on. So I'm quite intrigued about that. There's been lots of stories about this tournament being the kind of, this potentially could be the cut through of the game into America. But the more and more that I delve into it, it does very much seem like it is extremely focused on the Indian and Pakistani diaspora that has made its home in the United States.
And if that is if that is all it does, is there anything necessarily wrong with that? I mean, we're talking about a diaspora of millions of Indians and Pakistanis and Bengalis, and I saw the ground in Dallas the other day was packed out because there is a Nepalese population of something like 20,000 in Dallas alone, and half of them couldn't get into the ground. So, I mean, if that is the very least it's doing, it's still doing something, if you know what I mean. But
I do.
It's the hope that they drag a few others along with them, I guess, is what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Look, I think that's exactly right. And let's be right. Let's, not beat around the bush on this. The economics of the Cricket World Cup is driven by economics. The economics of the Indian diaspora driving the interest in the game in America, selling out stadiums, TV rights, all of that kind of stuff. Absolutely. I've got no qualms whatsoever. I'm more intrigued about how it intersects with American popular culture. Does it even get a look in? And I guess, one way that it might get onto Sports Center and programs like that is when you have someone that you've never heard of comes onto the scene and plays a swashbuckling innings to see one team that you've never heard of, or a bunch of players you've never heard of, take down another team that you've never heard of. And we saw that this week with Aaron Jones. Yeah. Aaron Jones, 94 not out, and one of the absolutely iconic innings and a great way to get the tournament underway.
And born in Queens, New York. Admittedly raised for the most part of his life in Barbados, where he was mates with, among others, Shea Hope, Jofra Archer and Jason Holder. So this incredible nursery, I guess, of cricket in Barbados, but he was New York born, which kind of feels important. The opener as well, who didn't get any runs, Stephen someone. There was 3 US-born players in that side, which is certainly more than you've got when you look at the likes of Oman who are almost entirely Pakistani or Gujarati immigrants. But yeah, I had a blast watching that game. Just to quickly recap it, USA beat Canada by 7 wickets with 14 balls remaining, chasing down 194 for 5, scoring 197 for 3. As you mentioned, Aaron Jones, 94 not out, 10 sixes, just 40 balls. He was incredible. He had 1 off 5 balls, and the commentators were kind of talking about what poor form he'd brought into this match, 4 single-figure scores in his last 5 innings, and how he really needed some runs. And then all of a sudden went everywhere. He was batting with a South African-born player called Andres Gu, I think is how you say it. They had a partnership, something like 131-run partnership. Gu scored 65 off 46. It was spectacular. At one stage, the required run rate was more than 12 and over, and then the unfortunate Jeremy Gordon bowled one of the overs for the ages. And if I can just take you through it, it started with a wide, then Gu hit a 6, then he hit a 4, then there was another wide, then there was a no ball where Gu was caught on the boundary. Then there was a no ball with 1 run. And then what's his pants Jones came down the other end, hit a 6. Then there was another wide. Then there was a 1, and there was only reason it was a 1 was the guy did a miracle bat back in on the boundary. And then there was a 6, and then there was a 4. It was 11 balls of carnage, 33 runs, and the game was pretty much decided at that point.
Oh, unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, I think Jones and Goose put on 131 and 58 balls. So they were in the strife. I've got to say, though, you look at his career record. I don't know if you've looked at it. Aaron Jones, he has got a terrible record. So the commentators were quite right and quite within their rights to have a crack at him. He's got a career strike rate in T20 of about 104. Yep. He's only ever hits 1/6 every 2 innings on average, and he's never scored more than 50 before. Oh, sorry, that's not true. His highest score was 50 before coming into this fixture. And now he's become an absolute legend of the game. So,
to use a baseball analogy, perhaps he's like Reggie Jackson. Perhaps he's a big game player. Mr. October, they used to call Reggie Jackson because he did nothing during the entire season, gets to the playoffs, started hitting home runs. That's Aaron Jones. Mr. June.
Good for the really, really cool way to start the tournament. And as you said, a decent crowd. I think it was only 6,000, but it was quite a lively 6,000 people at that game. Yeah. The next game up was the West Indies beating Papua New Guinea by 5 wickets with 6 balls remaining. A bit of a squeaky bum game, really, for the West Indies. And I guess the thing that caught my eye was that it was described as being played on a tricky 2-pace track, which is ominous for New Zealand, given they're set to play on that same track in Guyana. As you said, a terrible crowd. And really, the West Indies blushes were saved by Roston Chase, who got 42 off 27 when they were 97 for 5 after 16 chasing 136. Did anything catch your eye on that one, DC?
Yeah, I just Googling Papua New Guinea. Now, not all of the players' birthplaces are listed, but as far as I can make out, they've got something New Zealand certainly can't claim, and that is all of their players are locally born.
Wow.
And raised. And I was actually quite impressed. I thought they did well. I don't know, actually, when I say locally raised, maybe they go to Australia and play cricket in North Queensland or Brisbane or whatever, and then are available for Papua New Guinea. But they were certainly Papua New Guineans, and I thought they played pretty well, and they could have won that game.
Did I see that Papua New Guinea is coached by Tatenda Taibu? Is that correct? I think that's what I saw, but it might be wrong. Anyway, a close one for the West Indies, who have been called out by us and others as being a sort of a smoky chance of the tournament. But you do get the sense that they'll sort of build into their power game as they get their alchemy going in their team, being pulled back together specifically for the tournament. I watched a bit of Namibia versus Oman, who they beat in a super over, 109 all out versus 109 for 6. And just another reminder that David Visa, the man born in Gauteng, is an absolute beast with bat and ball for Namibia. He was absolutely sensational, 3 for 28, and then walloped 13 runs off 4 balls in the super over as well. And he looks a bit like Dave Grohl. He looks like he kind of doesn't really want to be there. And then they interview him after the match, and he seems like the nicest bloke in the world.
Yeah, Yeah, I watched this. This was in Bridgetown, Barbados, and again the wicket looked really treacly. It looked tricky to bat on, and it was a low-scoring thriller, I think, is the cliche you use at times like this. And then suddenly you get to the super over and it's 21 off it, and so Oman didn't have a chance of chasing that down. I think they were, after 5 balls, they were 1 for 4 in the super over. So always tricky to get that required 18 off the final ball. You need a lot of things to go your way, really. But again,
you need that guy. You need the guy from Canada to be bowling. That's one way.
Dead right. And again, I looked up birthplaces for Oman, and that's where I discovered that they're all Pakistani or Indian. So yeah, obviously, I mean, they're not too far apart across the Gulf of Arabia, is it? So obviously, it's a pretty popular landing spot for Pakistani immigrants.
Yes, someone's got to build the spectacular buildings, and they certainly get rich and die trying, I think is the phrase. South Africa beat Sri Lanka by 6 wickets with 22 balls remaining. This was a bit of a...
This pissed me off, this game.
I think you're going to have some views on this pitch, which I saw, I think it was The Guardian, described it as unscrupulous, which obviously means, I had to look that up, but it means unfair, and that South Africa played within their means, and they were a bit nervous. I'm sure you've got some thoughts. I'm keen to hear them, but we should just call out Onrik Nortje, 4 for not very many, 7 maybe, something preposterous like that. And this new bloke that I haven't seen, but apparently he was a superstar in the South African T20, helping the Sunrisers Eastern Cape, the magnificently named Otniel Bartman, not a Simpsons. I don't know, there's a Simpsons connection there somewhere, but surely if it's a surname, the parents didn't choose it. Quite an interesting character. Understand he was eligible and asked to move sort of from his country and village school to go to one of those posh schools and play sport wall to wall in South Africa. His mum said no, so he stayed at his local village school, very academic, and then as kind of like a bit of a breakthrough star as he's been finally let off his mother's apron strings and into the real world. He was sensational. 18 wickets at 11.8 in that South African T20 comp, and a runs per over of less than 7. He looks good.
Yeah. Look, I don't want to cheapen what he did because it is amazing and it's a great story, but anyone could look good bowling on that wicket. And it's such a shame because that was the game taken to New York. They built this incredible modular stadium out of a green park, out of Eisenhower Park, which is sort of out east of Queens, like you're heading right out into the Long Island Sound there, and amazing job of doing it. But what they relied on was dropping wickets that were built in Adelaide, then put on boats and shipped over to Savannah, Georgia, then trucked down to Florida to grow during the winter, and then trucked up to New York and dropped in. Unfortunately, everything about this venue relies on those wickets, which were created by the guy from Adelaide Oval, the guy, I think his name's Damien Hoff, and it was unfortunately next to unplayable. And I know the popular thing to say during these sort of things is, oh, well, was it really that bad? Was it that unplayable? Or was it just poor batting? Nah, that was tough. It was really hard work. And on one hand, I'm actually surprised that it was Hoff that was allowed to do it because he's the guy that prepared the drop-in wicket where India were all out for 30-something at the Adelaide Oval. So I'm surprised that BC...
This is penance. Is this is doing his time doing this one, do you think?
Yeah, let him anywhere near it. But I really wanted this game to work. I thought it was the first of these World T20 games between 2 test-playing nations. I wanted it to capture some imagination, but instead it was... slightly farcical, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is ominous for the rest of the tournament. There's a lot of faith being put in that New York pitch. It is preposterous, really, when you think about it. The architecture, the scale of the vision to do what they've done, and incredible what has been done.
Yeah, logistically and unbelievable.
But also completely unproven and an enormous risk, particularly when you think about, I think some of the tickets for the India-Pakistan game are selling for $5,000.
Yep.
And, you're looking at that game starting, not only is it a tricky pitch, but I'm pretty sure local time that game starts at 10:30 or 11 o'clock in the morning. It could be, maybe they could get to play twice. But it does seem like it's, well, I've got a feeling of trepidation about it as you, and it does sound like your description of that pitch is something a bit harsher than unscrupulous, DC.
Yeah, unplayable.
A couple more games, just very quickly. Afghanistan absolutely annihilated Uganda by 125 runs. Maybe we can have a touch on the Afghanis in a little bit when we preview that New Zealand game. But this was an absolute blitzkrieg, and Faruqi was the man. He took 5 wickets, his first time he's taken 5 wickets. And for Uganda, they looked incredibly
They looked like a minnow.
Confused when they were batting. They were 68 all out. Yeah. But they do have some of the best names, including their fast bowler, my favourite, Cosmos Kayawuta, which I think is just one of the great names in this World Cup. But yeah, 50, what is it? 58, 68, whatever they got.
68, yeah. That 68 was that they played like a genuine minnow. That was the first time where you looked at it and went, ooh, some teams are going to get some severe hidings here. They made Afghanistan look like, well, actually, shouldn't say that because New Zealand are due to play them, but Afghanistan looked like it was Australia playing New Zealand in the 90s, early 90s.
And then overnight, Scotland versus England was washed out. Scotland were absolutely going hammer and 90 for none. Lots of rain about and unfortunate. Another sort of ominous sign for looking at the weather forecast, which we can get into in a sec. And the Netherlands beat Nepal with Takapuna's finest, Max O'Dowd, anchoring the Netherlands chase as they mowed down 106. He was very calm, very composed, and took them through. I think they had 7 balls to spare, 8 balls to spare or something.
Great atmosphere there. Really good
atmosphere.
Is that
right? I only saw scorecards, DC. Yeah, nice.
Ground full of Nepalese, and actually it was a massive day for the New Zealand contingent. Tim Pringle took 3 for 20, Logan Van Beek took 3 for 18, and Max O'Dowd got them home, as you said, with an unbeaten half-century. The Dutch cracked me up, actually. I read an interview with Scott Edwards earlier in this tournament. Remember the confidence they took into the World Cup, you know, and Scott Edwards is at it again, saying when we're at our best, no one can beat us.
So good.
We're a match for anyone. And that's cool. Good on you. Good luck.
And frankly, you know, Nepal, they've got some tricky buggers in there. There could have been a little bit of a banana skin game. So good to see the Netherlands seize their opportunity. And, you know, they should be a cut above. And it's good to see that they've proved that, at least in the opening game.
I don't think Nepal had their best player, who was, I think, acquitted of rape charges recently. Lamachane, I think his name is, but he still didn't get a visa to get into the United States, which sounds probably fair enough. So I don't think they're as strong as they usually are, Nepal.
Good point. Yeah, definitely their main man for sure. Hey, DC, we'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll preview New Zealand versus the banana skin game, Afghanistan. Welcome back to the BYC. It's Paul Ford and Dylan Cleaver here, chewing the fat. And New Zealand finally going to get underway in a couple of days, DC, game versus Afghanistan, the opening game for the Black Caps in the Cricket World Cup. They're playing at Providence. I had a quick look. The last 4 winning scores at Providence in Georgetown, Guyana, 183 versus Uganda, 137 versus Papua New Guinea, 155 and 164. So the days of the IPL 250-plus scores are absolute dreamland. I've seen a couple of scaremongering headlines. My favourite was this one. Pool rival Afghanistan sends warning to Black Caps with big opening win over Uganda. I'm not sure that a win over the Cricket Cranes, which is what Uganda are called, means a hell of a lot. Something that may be factored in here is New Zealand's flights, but you'd hope that they'd be okay having travelled, I think, Auckland, San Francisco, Houston, Georgetown, which I think is about 35 hours. But they've had pretty close to a week, I think, to acclimatise and get over that jet lag. How do you see this one shaping up, DC?
Well, I'm a little bit worried about this. All the narrative or the kind of rhetoric coming out of the New Zealand camp has been remarkably negative. We had sort of Stead talking about jet lag and weather bombs, and Santner talking about what a chaotic start it's been and how distorted the start of the tournament has been. They've opted for no warm-up games because the team was coming in 3 different waves because they were coming from different parts of the world. It actually has sounded like a little bit of a shambles. I haven't heard anyone sort of sitting there over there going, yeah, we're in great shape. Can't wait to get stuck into it. We've had some amazing...
Plans coming together.
Yeah, we've had some amazing net sessions. It doesn't sound like you can barely get in the nets because of the weather. I did a bit of digging on this Providence ground. I looked at the 2023 Caribbean Premier League stats, actually, and that's where the majority of the games were played. And it's a decent pitch. It's like 163 average, which is kind of above where most of the grounds in the Caribbean are at the moment. And that average would have been as high as 190, except in the final was a complete blowout where Trinbago, were out for 94. There's no discernible advantage to batting first or second. It's you bat first, you win 4 out of the 9 games, 5 out of the 9 games if you batted second. And it seemed like kind of mid 160s was a decent total, which to me feels like what a T20 game with a reasonably even contest between bat and ball should look like. It should be about kind of 170. So it might not be quite as slow and as turgid as some of the cricket in the Caribbean has been over the last 10 years just because of the low, slow track. So it might suit New Zealand.
That sounds promising. I'll tell you something that doesn't sound promising is that Guyana, which is, of course, quite an unusual country. I think when we think of the West Indies, we always think of these beautiful tropical islands. And, of course, Guyana's on the South American continent. It's the only English-speaking on that continent. It's basically in maybe not a civil war, but certainly a political battle with Venezuela, I think, over some oil. There's a vein of the country that's contested, and there's a bit of a drama around that. But it's also known for its tropical rainforests, bauxite, gold, and timber. But let's focus in on the tropical rainforest, because I can tell you over the next few days, it is sensational conditions for growing a rainforest. It's the weather conditions from Thursday: 31 showers, Friday 31 thunderstorms and heavy showers, and Saturday 31 dull and dreary with showers, 93% chance of rain. So it is looking a bit iffy. I'm not whenever we talk about this, they pretty much always seem to get a game in, but there's definitely going to be some rain about, and I don't know whether that's helpful or a hindrance to the New Zealand team.
Yeah, well, it's a lottery, isn't it? I guess if you know beforehand, it can play into your decision at the toss. Most teams like to bat second when there's rain about, so you know what the Duckworth-Lewis equation is, but it doesn't always work that way. Guyana's a fascinating country. It's such an outlier in world cricket, and I've always been fascinated about it ever since I think I read Clive Lloyd's autobiography when I was about 12 or 13, and to me it sounded quite idyllic. Georgetown, Guyana sounded quite idyllic, but I've subsequently talked to plenty of people who've been there, and it's far from idyllic. I think it's you have to be careful at night. They definitely tell you don't go out on ones. Make sure there's a group of you when you go out. But I've compiled, and it's also a really curious place in the Caribbean milieu in that it produces incredible batters and virtually no fast bowlers at all. But I've compiled a Guianese all-time 11, and I've had to leave out some incredible batters, but I'm opening with Roy Fredericks and Ramnaresh Sawan. Shivnarine Chanderpool's elevated to number 3, Basil Butcher's number 4, Alvin Calatrans number 5, Clyde Lloyd is captaining the team at number 6, Rowan Kanai.
Supercat.
The cat, yeah. Rowan Kanai will be the best ever number 7. He also has to wicket keep because they weren't rich in wicket keepers. Carl Hooper, I've got coming in at 8, and he's a genuine all-rounder in this team. Ahead of Lance Gibbs, who was the first bowler to take 300 test wickets. Shamar Joseph, on very little evidence, is already in the team at number 10. And Colin Croft, best known in New Zealand for the strange angle of his run-up, is batting number 11. I couldn't find a place for Roger Harper or Devendra Bishu or Shimron Hetmeyer and several other batters, actually. So it's a pretty powerful all-time 11.
Pretty good, and I'll tell you what, I'm glad that Tajenerine Chanderpool did not make your team. I'm happy with that. Couple of bits and pieces for you. I never knew that Lance Gibbs was Clive Lloyd's cousin, cousin. So, yeah, thick as thieves. Obviously a real fraternity amongst the Guyanese players as well. You mentioned Basil Butcher. Now, I don't know a hell of a lot about him, but he was an amazing player back in the 50s with your mate Kanai. And then Kanai, is that right how you say it?
Yeah, grew up together, didn't
they? And another guy called Joe Solomon. Yeah. And they all worked together on this sugar plantation in Port Morant. And there was a guy called Clyde Walcott, a legendary batter from Barbados, I think.
One of the three W's.
Who looked after them. And so he was employed. How good is this? So Clyde Walcott was employed by the local Sugar Producers Association to be the cricket organizer for the Port Morant Sugar Plantation cricket team. And he was amazing at letting guys develop their own technique and turn into these prodigious talents. So, yeah, a really awesome story. And, I guess where you get to around this is it's incredible that the West Indies is just this train smash together of lots of these extraordinary countries, each of which have their own strengths and weaknesses and could probably and have historically been teams in and of their own right. And you wonder whether it's going to go back to that as West Indies cricket looks like it's going to fragment. Hey, and what about this New Zealand team, DC? Who is actually going to play? Have you got an 11 for us? And have you got a couple of things? I'm conscious we've got Devon Conway coming back from a thumb injury. Finn Allen's got a back injury. Glenn Phillips didn't play in the IPL. Kane Williamson only played a couple. We've got 9 guys that have been in the pressure cooker of the IPL. They've got, as I mentioned, 30 to 40 hours of travel, a big gap before the first game. There's a few things to sort out that we haven't sorted out, it seems.
They're leaning heavily on experience. It's not I think I mentioned this last week when we had a soft relaunch, but it's not a team that fills me with a huge amount of anticipation or excitement, actually. I presume they will open with Allen, and I think Conway has to because unless they have a real volte-face and decide that Glenn Phillips is, in fact, a wicket-keeper, not an off-spinner, I think Conway has to wicket-keep. Williamson clearly has to play. He has to captain, so he's got to be in the top 3. So Allen has to do a lot of heavy lifting in that top 3 to get the scoring rate off to a strike rate off to a decent clip. I think Mitchell probably bats 4 ahead of Chapman. Then they would have Phillips at 5, and then I'm just completely confused. I've gone for Bracewell, Neesham, Santner, Sodhi, Ferguson, Bolt. But you could make an argument that Chapman could be in there. You could make an argument that Henry should be in there. You can certainly make an argument that Sodhi shouldn't be in there. Ravindra doesn't get a look in for me, but personally I would have him in there. But I don't know how you can play him in the 11 with the way they've configured that squad. It's a bit of a dog's breakfast for me, to be honest. I've not really settled. I picked that 11, but I'm really unsettled about it, and you can talk me out of it any which way you want.
Yeah, look, I've got to get. I feel like Ravindra and Chapman are kind of battling for the same position for me, so that I've got them in a duel to the death at number 6, and I'm going to go for. I would pick Ravindra. I think they'll pick Chapman. I think Chapman's got he's been good over the last 12 months for New Zealand, so and did some good things in Pakistan. So fair enough. I'm not sort of dying on a hill over that. Then I'm going Neesham or Bracewell, and I'm going to pick Bracewell because I think I'm reading the tea leaves from Gary Stead. Santner's a lock for me. I think that they will pick Southey. I'm not picking Sodhi, and I'm not picking Henry, and then it's Ferguson and Bolt for me. So
okay,
yeah, but as you say, it does feel like New Zealand does have a very interchangeable team.
So when I went through and did my definites, that's what I always do first. I put in the ones that will definitely, there's no way they're going to miss out. And I had Allen, Conway, Williamson. And again, it's not a top 3 I particularly like, but just because of the situation with the wicketkeeper, it has to be that. So I had those 3. And then I went down to Santner at 8 as my next definite. And then Ferguson at Bolt at 10 and 11. So I had 6 definites. The rest, it's just throwing stuff in the air and depending on which way it lands,
And frankly, it should be good enough. That's the other thing as well. It's not like we're not choosing between guys that are shockingly bad. Where it's actually an embarrassment of strength in a way. But I think the one thing that you would say that New Zealand is potentially missing is just that absolutely blockbusting slogathon at the top. And as you say, a lot of pressure on Allen.
It's not an embarrassment of strike rate strength at the top. I think that is the Achilles heel of this team, and you wonder when is it time to give Robinson a fair crack at it or something like that. But then a very good player has to miss out. So
And but Afghanistan, I guess, a lot of pressure on their, well, a lot of stock put in there, a bit like Pakistan, really, on their openers, right? Ibrahim Zadran, Ramanullah Gurbaz. I mean, they put on 154 against Uganda. That doesn't mean anything, but you know that they are going to be super, hyper, magnificently aggressive. They're great to watch. They go absolutely balls to the wall in terms of that opening partnership. And then it's all about the old dogs, Rashid Khan and Naveen al-Haq, generally with the ball, although, as mentioned earlier, Fazl Haq Faruqi taking 5 for 9 against Uganda. Probably put about a 90% discount on that, but that feels like their main weapons. Is
Mujib playing? I always seem to have this little mild panic and anxiety about coming up against Afghanistan spinners. But unless I'm mistaken, New Zealand always does well against them, don't they? I don't think they've tripped us up like they have other teams.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think maybe you're hearing some of that sort of wariness. You know, you wouldn't say that, as you said, you know, New Zealand are hardly going into this game supremely confident. So yeah, I think they'll be doing their homework, as will Afghanistan. You know, their coach Jonathan Trott, obviously a smart fella, and they've also got a guy that you may have heard of, Dwayne Bravo, who was their bowling advisor. Obviously, a bit of a hometown advantage there for him, although not so sure how much help he'll be providing to the spinners. But yes, hey, we should grab a quick break, and then DC, I think you've got a quiz for us, and I'll bring us back with a bit of cricket violence. Welcome back to the BYC. And DC, I understand you've got a quiz question for us.
Yeah, I just wanted
a crossover between Guyana and New Zealand.
Yeah, I just wanted to stretch this Guyanese theme as far as I possibly could. And look, if you can name the Test cricketer from Guyana who died in Hamilton, New Zealand 2 years ago, the first person that pops that into our inbox, and Paul will give the details to that in just a bit, we'll get a shout out next week and an optional Jason Hoyt strippogram at your workplace. So you choose. You either get a shout out on the BYC or Hoyty in for a strippogram. We have to check he's available, obviously. But yeah, can you name the Test cricketer from Guyana who died in Hamilton, New Zealand in 2022? Do you know the answer, Paul?
I think I actually do, but I'm not going to spoil it. And, you know, I definitely want someone to win a Jason Hoyt strippogram. We may have to kidnap him, sort of like SCG McGill, and get him to that strippogram destination. But that's okay. We can do that for the team. But, yeah, flick us an email to byc@beigebrigade.co.nz or slide into the DMs of the Alternative Commentary Collective or the Beige Brigade on Instagram or Facebook with that answer. And while you're at it, if you've got a short wee epistle, flick that through to us as well. We'd love to hear from you, getting back on the horse over the course of the Cricket World Cup, and it'll be fantastic to hear from our loyal and non-loyal listeners over the next few weeks.
Paul Ford's Cricket Violence Corner.
Well, this week we are in Australia. It is official. Disgraced former cricketer Michael Slater's name is being wiped from history in his home city. The Wagga Wagga City Councillors have voted in favour of changing the name of Michael Slater Oval. This honour for the Test batter was unveiled in 2014. Fellow Wagga products and former international cricketers Mark Taylor and Jeff Lawson also have ovals named in their honour in Wagga Wagga. Colloquially dubbed, the city is dubbed the City of Good Sports for its history of producing top athletes. But Michael Slater Oval will be no more after councillors voted 4-3 in favour of changing the name. Of course, the 54-year-old was last month refused bail by a Sunshine Coast court as he faces 19 charges relating to domestic violence. I've got a couple of nominations for the Oval. Sam Moran from the Wiggles, so the Wiggles Oval. I don't think anyone would be crossing that out. Dame Edna Everidge, I'm not sure how open-minded they are in Wagga Wagga, but she's from that neck of the woods. And this one, speaking of crossovers between Australia and New Zealand, what about Raylene the Castle Oval? I think that could confuse enough Australians. She is a product of Wagga Wagga as well. So there we go. A couple of suggestions from me to fix Wagga Wagga. DC, over to you.
A really sad story, that, actually. And I was reading a couple of the comments from the councillors who voted to retain the name, and it didn't give you a lot of hope for for Australia, for inland rural Australia, with some of the thinking that went into some of the defences of Michael Slater. But anyway, we'll move right on. I've got a little bit of correspondence. This one's from Simon Sherpa, and it relates to last week's conversation about the IPL. And he said, "Hey lads, just wondering what is to stop IPL owners buying into the Super Smash." I think the biggest thing to stop them is they're not for sale. But apart from that, Paul Ford, do you have any thoughts off the top of your head?
It's a really interesting one, and I guess it's a real dilemma that countries that currently have not engaged private ownership into their T20 franchises, i.e. England, who are obviously contemplating doing that. It's about to happen. Australia are in there's lots of discussion about that becoming a thing for the Big Bash. Look, I do wonder whether the market has been subtly tested and there's kind of no interest. Yeah. Otherwise, I would imagine, it potentially is. I think that a primary issue that they've got at the moment is, where does this Super Smash? New Zealand's a complicated place to get to.
Time zone's terrible.
The time zone is terrible. And also now you've got the added complexity of the New Zealand summer competing with Major League Cricket in the United States and also the South African competition. So, arguably you could say it's quite a good idea. It's maybe the direction that the world is turning, but maybe it has turned too far for New Zealand to even contemplate doing that.
Yeah.
We've talked before on the BYC about maybe New Zealand's place in the world around, or the Super Smash's place in the world around that, is to be a feeder competition for one of the others feels more realistic, unfortunately.
And that's where I think that's the only kind of realistic proposition, is that you'd buy into the New Zealand competition if you're using it as a development vehicle for talent. Essentially, you're not buying it as a broadcast vehicle because no one wants to watch. Even in India, you're not watching cricket at that time of the day because it's just such a dreadful time zone. So it would be a development because they simply can't get all the young talent that they've got there enough game time. And again, where's the attraction for New Zealand in that, apart from a few million rupees coming in? Do we want to turn the Super Smash into a development vehicle for young Indian talent, or other talent that they own from other countries that aren't getting game time necessarily in the South African one or the IPL? It's very complicated, but that is why I would love to see what New Zealand cricket's strategy around this globalization of T20 cricket is, and specifically towards the IPL, because there is going to be massive change in this area, I think.
The other thing that's in my head around this, and it's not a fully formed thought, but and it's almost sort of potentially it's slightly humiliating for New Zealand cricket to contemplate, but maybe our place in the world around this is actually becoming a development league for some of these teams and some of the players that are actually going around on this World Cup who aren't the superstars, and it's going to end up being Afghanis, Ugandans, players from Oman, Netherlands, and that becomes New Zealand kind of carves out its place as a sort of secondary, as part of a secondary world tour, which has not yet emerged, but eventually, as the IPL franchises take their kind of Formula One tier of cricketers, including lots of the big dogs from New Zealand as well, take them up onto these full-time contracts to play all around the world in various different competitions for teams that they own. There's going to be a bunch of players who are left behind who either aspire to be in that next tier or who are quite comfortable going around the world playing cricket and getting paid decent money without becoming squillionaires. And maybe realistically, that's a more pragmatic place for New Zealand to end up in the cricketing universe. I'm not sort of advocating for that, just being realistic. And on that note, thanks for downloading and tuning into the BYC. It's bloody nice to be back. We will also be back on Monday too, with some glee or some gloom. We'll be giving our hot take on the inaugural New Zealand game versus the misogynists of Afghanistan. Plus, we'll be reviewing and previewing the other matches of the tournament. In the meantime, feel free to get in touch over the weekend by emailing us at byc@beigebrigade.co.nz. And go the bloody Black Caps, 11:30 a.m. Saturday morning. Come on.